about to get started, everybody. Welcome to Include webinar in its continuing series. We're trying to roll these out every couple of months and encourage people to participate in the series of webinars and also read the blogs that each of our webinar presenters post on the Include website. So my job is really simple today. I'm coming to you from Boston, and Boston College is hosting the webinar, but our real host today is Tracy Galvin from Belfast, Northern Ireland, Queen's University. So I'm just going to hand it off to Tracy right now and welcome everybody to today's webinar.
Thanks, Richard. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar, as Richard said. Please share in the chat, just as I introduce our presenters today, just please share in the chat where you are virtually attending from and why you are interested in universal design for learning. Okay, so today we have Dr. Seanna Takacs and Dr. Brad Anderson from Kwantlen Polytechnic University, KPU. They'll be presenting today, which is our last seminar before the summer break, on a topic that will be certainly of interest to many of you around making a program more inclusive and accessible to attract, retain, and allow unions to progress and succeed in an ever-changing diverse learner population. So Seanna is an education consultant who has over a decade of working across different education sectors. Her PhD was in education psychology that has led to many areas of research and projects, as highlighted in her interests in language acquisition and literacy processes, learning differences, and accessibility to ensure equitable educational experiences for all. And Seanna will share her experiences on supporting change within a program through the UDL lens. Brad is an author who writes fiction for fun in his spare time. There's a link to his work in the blog post, and someone will share the blog post now with you, or share our Include website link. He started off his career in drug manufacturing and completed his MBA in 2006 and doctorate in 2019 in organizational and managerial wisdom, which maybe a lot of us could do with some tips in that area right now. Brad will share his experience as an academic and the program, and the longer version of both Seanna and Brad's bios are in the Include website. Both Katherine Carpenter and Amanda Bickel were also involved in the project, but they were unable to attend today, but we think it's important to thank them for their contribution in the project. Include is here to share good practice and build international community perspective through the UDL lens. So if you're interested in being part of our collaborative community, please do sign up through the website, as we are always looking for speakers and volunteers to be part of our growing community and sharing good practice around various interests and topics, and particularly around research, professional development, policy, educational practice. So please do reach out to us and make contact. Just some quick housekeeping before we get started. Please ensure you're on mute, and you can turn your camera off if you're having any Wi-Fi issues during the presentation. We're here to learn from one another, so please be thoughtful and considerate of other opinions and always be respectful. We've turned on closed captions, so please let us know if there's any issues there. And the webinar will be recorded for those who are unable to attend today's session who have registered. So you can look back at that in your own time. We strongly encourage you to engage with others through the chat function. If you want to ask questions, add comments, please put it in the chat. We have Seanna and Aressa today. Keep an eye on the chat so they'll take note of anything if there's questions in later. And we'll have plenty of time for discussion in the end. So now I'm absolutely delighted to hand over to Seanna and Brad to share their practice with us on a project that was entitled Entrepreneurial Leadership Program Renewal at KPU, catering for student voice and choice. Thank you.
Great.
So just share your slides, that'd be great.
Yeah, thank you, Tracy. Thank you for a lovely intro. I'll just share my slides here. There we are. Everyone can see?
Great, yeah.
Okay, lovely. Thank you so much. Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We've got lots to talk about today, so I'll get started. I'm coming to you from Port Coquitlam, British Columbia, which is the traditional and unceded territory of the Coquitlam people. So where is Kwantlen Polytechnic? So you can see up on the screen, we actually have 5 campuses across the lower mainland of British Columbia. So just outside of the Vancouver area. At KPU, we have more than 20,000 students. We are a teaching focused institution with over 140 programs. Excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. We have lots of hands-on work, lots of opportunities for practicum experiences and work placements. So that just to kind of frame the kind of work we do at KPU. So let's have a look at a bit of history of the ENTR program. So the ENTR program, Entrepreneurial Leadership, it was launched in 1999. And that was one of the university's first BBA programs. So this was one of the pickles we worked with. There 93.6% of ENTR graduates were employed after graduation. Yet what started to happen over the years is that attendance and enrollment started to decline down to 40%. So this was the problem. You know, what are we going to do about this program? So the folks in the NTR decided to undertake this extensive consultation, and it was truly extensive, with industry and alumni. Current ENTR students had a lot to say about this, and they decided to do a redesign. And the idea was to make the program more appealing, but also make it more applicable and also make it more relevant to sort of priorities around business education. So here are the goals for the renewal. So of course, attract a broader student base was top of the list. Another priority was building on a history of experiential learning. Being a polytechnic, really wanting to emphasize the experiential learning aspect. Also clarifying the program's intent for stakeholders. And in the beginning, when I was brought on board to consult on UDL, that was a lot of the work is, you know, why are we here? You know, that really nice sort of rationale work that we would look at as kind of engagement in the UDL framework. So why are we here? Why are we doing what we're doing? What is our purpose? What are our goals? What are our mission? You know, those sorts of things. And also aligning with various accreditation requirements, and also just simply modernizing the program learning outcomes, which wasn't simple at all. Okay, so these are the priorities that started to develop. So what ENTR faculty really wanted was a course that should be open to all students. So really, you know, thinking about how to appeal not only to students in the School of Business, but, you know, could they recruit students from, say, horticulture, or students from criminology or sociology? Is there some other way that we could you know, recruit other students from other areas? And the decision was made to do that by eliminating some program restrictions and some of the unnecessary prerequisites. They wanted to design for a fully online compatible BBA, again, for flexibility, for accessibility. The next priority was to use a spiral curriculum. So I'll talk about that a little bit more in a bit. And also to use UDL principles. And that was how I got involved in the project, was that all of this sort of, you know, rationale work, planning work had been done, and then I was brought in for a workshop. And, you know, we really started to talk about UDL priorities and how they overlap really, really nicely with entrepreneurial leadership. So that was lovely. And then we kind of worked from there. And the point of UDL was around this experiential learning. You know, how can we create meaningful authentic learning experiences? How can we create authentic assessments that make sense and are really going to support a sense of entrepreneurial identity? And then finally, the last priority was prime principles being integrated through all ENTR courses. Okay, so a little bit more on UDL. There was a real priority and a real focus, not only on class participation, but educational participation. So again, going back to those sorts of rationale engagement sorts of pieces, how are we going to support motivated learning? How are we going to support students who are coming into the program with a sense of excitement and keenness to develop a sense of identity and develop a sense of purpose? Excuse me. And how are we going to make sure that they're finishing the program with the same and feeling hopeful and excited about their careers? So the idea is that we didn't just want multiple paths through the ENTR courses. So bringing in student voice and choice in courses, but the real question was, and it was a really exciting question, is how can we design for multiple paths through the ENTR program? And that's what we really embarked upon doing. There was also a priority on developing representations of entrepreneurial identity to kind of contextualize the content. So again, moving past that kind of delivery sort of model, we really wanted to look at, well, what are the entrepreneurial contexts? It's not just, start a business, make money, move on with your life. It's kind of like, well, where do we find entrepreneurship? And when the ENTR faculty started to talk about that, we really, really started to expand this sense of where entrepreneurship lies, that it can lie in, starting your own business, that's sort of, being enterprising, but it can also lie in, various more consolidated institutions, in larger companies, in multinational contexts. So that's where we're really sort of, that's where faculty really started to expand this idea of identity and say, well, you can have an entrepreneurial identity that looks, a little bit different than we might expect. And again, really prioritizing student voice and student choice in design. Okay, so why the spiral curriculum? One of the pieces that continued to be mentioned in those early days and in those early sort of workshops was this idea that we didn't want students to sort of write the paper, do the project, submit it, and then move on to the next course. It was more like, well, can we go through some sort of development cycle? Can it be iterative? Can we have students sort of build on what they've been doing? And that's a lot of that is tied to student voice and student choice. If you know that you're planning sort of a course of inquiry or a course of career development, then suddenly your education looks a little bit different. So that's where I suggested, well, why don't we look at the spiral curriculum by Jerome Bruner? So this is the idea where we're starting with this kind of nugget, right? This nugget of interest, this nugget of information, this nugget of experience, because students are coming into the NTR program already with some business experience and some sort of experience in entrepreneurship. So why not use that and, sort of exploit all the strengths that brings to a program? And the idea is that when we start with that nugget, we revisit the topic, and the complexity of that topic increases. The more you revisit it, the more detailed it gets, the more nuanced it gets. There's sort of a network of knowledge that grows up around that initial sort of nugget, and it gets developed with each revisiting. So through each course, each group project, each instructor, we had the idea that there would be this kind of ever expanding knowledge base. And of course, the idea is that any of that new learning always gets recontextualized. So rather it being, oh, well, here's a new project. How am I going to do this? It's kind of like, how am I going to recontextualize that? Given that I've already done this sort of work, but also with my future goals and future courses. So it's that continual process of recontextualizing. And I think that's been a really powerful driver of the program renewal. So then what happened is, because we're not just overhauling courses, we're overhauling the entire program. The program learning outcomes were revised, and this was, for me as the UDL consultant, this was really, really interesting, because the work that I enjoy doing very much is sort of being like a super synthesizer, is to kind of, sit in conversations, do a lot of listening, take a lot of notes, and kind of boil it all down and say, well, these are the kinds of themes that are emerging, and this is what happens. So there were 4 main program learning outcomes that emerged from these conversations. So the first one was know thyself. So developing a sense of entrepreneurial identity. The second program learning outcome was creating opportunities. Where do we create opportunities? What constitutes an opportunity? How do you develop it? With whom? In what context? The third program learning outcome was, mobilizing all of those resources, all of that knowledge that you have to, and I think the conversation sort of went that, that often tends to be a gap. It's that you could acquire all of this information, but what are you going to do with it, right? How are you going to recognize it? How are you going to use it? How are you going to push it out into the world? And then that, of course, connects with the fourth program learning outcome, which is to grow. So once you've recognized these opportunities, you've learned to mobilize them, how are you going to grow them? How are you going to expand them? And really emphasizing that as part of entrepreneurial leadership. Okay. So this is one of the new courses, and Brad, I'd be really interested to see what you think of this, because you had a lot of voice in what should the new courses look like. What should those beginner courses look like if we're going to attract folks from other programs? What is that going to look like? So what do you think now? Because I think the entrepreneurial inquiry, that course was a little bit your brainchild.
A little bit. Yeah. So we kind of wanted to hook the students in the first year, right? And so a lot of the first year courses all focus a lot on that know thyself element. So in terms of the PLOs, the first PLO was know thyself, get to figure out. And really, when we expand on that, what we were really wanting is we wanted them to start to explore to what direction do they want to devote their passions in life, right? And you could imagine that our imagining was, the feedback we got was that sort of confirmed this, is that's the kind of thing that, can pull people in, right? And so, yeah, a lot of these first year courses do focus a lot on, just sort of exploring what are your interests, what can entrepreneurship be and where are your interests? So there's a lot of activities where it's quite introspective and you try to figure out where your passions are and you sort of explore and play in that a little bit there. And then once we have that, the idea is, and you'll see that with the next slide as well. So this is sort of the foundation where it's kind of just, it's just sort of this fun little exploration of yourself. Then we build on that later on. Once you sort of have that idea of what are some of the things that you're interested in the higher level courses, we're like, okay, let's start building that out and seeing what that might look like until we actually culminate in the fourth year courses where it's like, okay, make it happen. So and so far it's been working really. Like the feedback we've been getting from these first year courses are pretty positive. Students seem to be pretty interested in it. We've got some really great teachers, really sort of student focused teachers that are running it, and that seems to be working really well.
Okay, let's look at, you're just talking about let's look at the next slide. So one of the pieces, of course, given the spiral curriculum, is how is this going to build? So it was very interesting, what are those first initial kind of nuggets of interest going to be that come through in those first year courses? So what do you think now about this, Brad, about, building towards the third and fourth level courses?
Yeah. So in a way, this is all just still a grand experimental. This is just a big experiment in a real way. We've been running live for less than a year, so we don't have a tremendous amount of data to see how it's all fitting together. But we do have some preliminary data, like we do have some, and it's all anecdotal right now, but the feedback we're getting from the teachers in teaching these courses that are seeing these students just starting to flow through the system is encouraging. And so, yeah, when we kind of look at this course versus the previous course was entrepreneurial inquiry. It's like, what are your interests? Let's sort of explore what types of things entrepreneurship could be. What are the types of things that might sort of light a fire in your belly? Here with this entrepreneurial proposal, we're sort of returning to this in the third year. So again, that spiral curriculum, we're returning to this idea, but now they're later on in their program and they've gained some skills, from other courses where they can start to, okay, let's actually come up with a proposal for an idea. That first year course, it's like, what are your interests? Here we are in the third year course, returning to this. Let's actually kind of flesh out some proposals and some ideas. How do we actually sort of start to put some meat on these bones here? And I should also mention that when we structure this, we have the ENTR program, the Entrepreneurial Leadership Program. And at our school, we have core business programs, and every business degree has to take these cores regardless. So the marketing, HR, entrepreneurial leadership, they have to take these core courses. And so while they're taking our courses are all sort of built around this entrepreneurial theme, this exploration that's built around those 4 PLOs. If they're in our program, they're also taking these core business courses and sort of starting to fill in some of these more specific business disciplines and getting some competencies there, which they can then bring into this. I saw Richard in the chat has some great questions about, we have open prereq structures. What do we do with people who don't come from a business background, who come from other departments? I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit more in my part a little bit down the way there. But for most of the students are going through, they're getting an ENTR, a BBA degree. They're in the business program, so they're getting these business skills sort of on the, we think of it as on the side, but in their core courses, which they can then bring into our ENTR courses, where we start to, okay, let's play with this, let's develop, let's see how we can use these skills to sort of build out this vision and these ideas that you have for yourself.
I remember too, just as you were talking, when we were going through the approval process, what was really interesting is there was a lot of concern about courses overlapping, and that it's going to be, there's the concern that if you don't have specific content for specific courses, then there's going to be too much overlap and it'll be redundant in some sort of ways. And I remember that was a really interesting challenge to explain that. And it's too bad Amanda can't be with us, because she was really, really good at explaining, how that would kind of look in the flesh. But that's what we tried to get across, was that, well, that's kind of the point, is that, just because there's overlap doesn't mean that there's redundancy. It doesn't mean that it's repetitive. It's that idea, sort of, getting that across, that a revisiting does not mean that it's the same, right? Yeah. And a recontextualizing doesn't mean it's the same, right?
And I can give you a great in the flesh example of that as we've got this running now. So yeah, in that first year course that we kind of showed you in the previous slide, the 1100 course, it's entrepreneurial inquiry. So it's just this early, these kids, they're fresh out of high school, 18, 19 years old, they're just kind of starting to explore what their interests are, right? In this course, we sort of turn those interests into a proposal. So again, we're sort of adding layers and depth onto, and we're sort of shifting more from introspection to action as we move through the program, right? So get the ideas, just sort of explore ideas in the first year course. Here in the second and third year courses, we start to flesh that out. How can we sort of move closer to implementation? And then in the fourth year course that I'll talk a little bit about later, one of the components of that fourth year course is where they come up with like a personal action plan for themselves after they graduate. And the expectations are fairly detailed, like envision your life. What do you want it to look like in 5 years? Figure out all of your skill gaps and come up with a plan to fill all those skill gaps to make that vision happen, in the years after you graduate, right? So we kind of take them from, they're sort of fresh out of high school. What are the interests? What lights a fire in your belly? Let's look at kind of fleshing that out to, okay, let's kind of lock it in and come up with a vision for the future, right? So that's kind of how, so each layer we kind of add layers, add sophistication. We sort of move more from introspection to making it actually happen in the real world.
I'm just looking in the chat. Tracy has a really interesting question. Does the inclusion of identity in the PLOs increase learner autonomy, drawing from prior learning that leads to a sense of belonging and respecting representation? That was the goal. Yes, that was actually the goal. When we started to talk about learner identity and voice, that was part of making an sort of an inclusive environment. If we're starting from the point where learners have voice and choice, and that's supported and kind of protected, and where it's kind of like, well, we're all in the trenches trying to develop this identity in this project and this, these career goals. We're all working on the same stuff. How can we, care for and support and include each other? Just having that sort of undergirding. That's the idea. And Brad's going to give some examples to show that, because it's looking like, that's the case. I think the program's successful in that sort of goal.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And just to kind of pick up from there, and this is where I pick up. In one of the second year courses, Tracy mentioned at the start that my research was in organizational wisdom, and I built that into one of the courses in the second year. And in the second year, one of the things we get them to do is to explore what are the values that are important to them. So one of the themes of wisdom is like, hey, what are the values that, values drive wise action. So we get them to explore what are the values that are important to you. But also in that course, we start to also explore the diversity of values in human experience and how it drives human behavior. And we can actually start to look at situations where you can see people that are fighting with each other and actually start to pull apart, like, okay, what are the values that are driving me? What are the values that are driving them? And like, you can actually start to see like, oh, we actually want the same thing in a lot of areas. It's just, we're using a different decision-making model to get there. So yeah, there is a lot, we get them to explore themselves, but then we also as these courses go on, sort of embed that in a broader context of human societies, of human businesses, and so on. So yeah, and so Seanna, so you were here during the development, and then you kind of handed it all off to you didn't hand it off, but then it goes to all of us who are sort of down in the trenches with the students. So what were your hopes for the program after we sort of got everything approved and you got to ride off into the sunset? What would you hope for us? What were you hoping for us?
Well, I think to come from in my heart of hearts, it's really, the inclusive practice. Those are the two things that really drive me, is really inclusive practice, and also seeing people in really rewarding, interesting learning environments where they really have a sense of development, right? They're where they really have a sense of sort of building. And so that's what I was really hoping to see, is that, there would be that sort of, we're kind of all in it together. And we're all developing these points of interest, and we're developing in our careers. And I, what I really wanted to see was that what would carry forward is that once everyone's graduated, then they have this, this network of support and care and, really strong, just a really strong network of connections that, you know, because that's so much once school's done. You know, those are the folks that are, you know, I wanted them to be able to say, you know, I remember my third year course, I forget his name, but he had this really, really cool idea. Maybe we could use, maybe we could use that now.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Awesome. Here's hoping. So yeah, the program is less than, it's gone live. It's live, but it's less than a year old. We launched it in September 2021. So we're just getting our first year kind of with our feet on the ground. And so I'll talk to you a little bit about this fourth year course. Now this fourth year course, so you know, we made the shift in September. And so there's a bunch of students that were kind of already in our program. And then, you know, they're at the fourth year, so they just kind of plop into this course. So these students that are in this fourth year course have not gone, you know, they haven't gone through the 4-year program because it's only been in existence for a couple of semesters. But this is, you know, we flip the switch and we put it into place. We're like, let's see what happens when we just sort of do it, you know, just sort of turn on the cold water or the shower and see how students adapt to it. So this fourth year course, I kind of call this course my extreme UDL course, right? Because it is 100% entirely student driven. You can you can think of it as an independent project course. We call it entrepreneurial action, and really, you know, sort of the idea with that course is like, hey, class, you have to do something. If you want to pass this course, you got to do something. You got 4 months, go. And it's a little bit more structure than that, but that's kind of what it is, right? You know, we do give them a little bit more structure to kind of walk through how do you come up with a project, you know, come up with a project plan, goals and stuff like that. But the course was intended for things like, hey, if you want to start your own business, if that's what you want to do, you got 4 months to start to get things actually happening with it. If you want some change in the world to happen, I'm giving you 4 months to make it happen. So it's 100% student driven. Students will create the projects that they implement. They define projects goals. And I also get students to define the grading rubric that I use to assess their final projects. And I feel that is worth repeating. I get students to define the rubric that I use to grade their final projects. I have to approve the rubric. I have some standards. I have to approve the rubric. But the idea behind this is that this is your project. I tell students this is your project. It is not my job to tell you what your end goal should look like. You need to determine what your end goal should look like. You will tell me what that end goal should look like. You'll tell me what that is. And then I'll assess your final project to see, does it actually look like how you wanted it to look? So in this fourth year course, we sort of extremely hand over the reins to the students. I grade the process. I talk about, I grade the process. So there's like meetings, there's reports, there's meetings and things like that you have to do. And I sort of grade the process that you go through to make this happen. But the final thing that you actually deliver, that's yours. You tell me what it should look like, and I'll grade that for you here. And I have some examples here, which I'll just share. So several of the students, they did a lot of open access kind of stuff. Yeah, I'm as Seanna says, yeah, I'm sort of that. It's the guide on the side rather than the guy on the stage, or sage on the stage. I'm the guide on the side rather than the sage on the stage. So let's see if I can get my chat. There we go. So that link in the chat there, what this one group did was, so this is in Canada, this is a Canadian context. There are a bunch of HR students. And, in Canada, we have a bunch of statutory holidays, but our statutory holidays are kind of based on the Christian calendar. There we go. It's based on the Christian calendar. We got like Easter and Christmas and the traditional things that you'd expect in like a country that evolved out of Britain, right? But we're a multicultural society. Maybe Easter is not the biggest of a deal as to Muslims. And it's like, well, it's too bad you have to take this stat holiday. But there's a clause in our labor codes that allows companies to have what we call flexible stat holidays. So there's a clause in our labor code that allows companies to allow their employees to choose which holidays they want to take as stats. So if you don't want Easter, but you want to take some times off for during Ramadan, you can do that. You can sort of choose. And so these students, this is in the labor code. Nobody knows about it. Nobody really knows how to implement it. These students wanted to design some HR policies that company, like they have, what you see there on that website there is they've developed like an HR policy template that companies can take that they could implement. And so that's one of the things that they wanted to do. They wanted to create this template for stat holidays. I also pushed them to see if they can get some companies to actually adopt it. They weren't able to get anyone to actually adopt it, but they got somebody who was actually interested. They couldn't get them to adopt it during the semester, but they were going to pursue it after the semester ended to see if they could actually get this company to adopt this HR policy. So that's one of the cool things that one of the student teams did. You guys can actually take this resource, what I just put in the chat there. This team, what they did is they're fourth year business students. They've had lots of bad experiences in teams. I don't know if you've met people, but some of them are a handful. So they've had some bad team experiences, and so they wanted to create a resource that students could use and that instructors could use to help instruct students. How do you actually have good team experiences? And if you have a look at that resource and you actually start clicking through, like they did some pretty sophisticated things. Like they're HR students. They're HR students, so they have a little bit of knowledge about human interactions. But to come up with how do you actually develop an effective team, they had to do a tremendous amount of research. If you actually explore that resource, they have interactive assignments that people can actually do. So as a teacher, you could assign this as a text. Like their vision was this would be like a little micro credential that teachers could make students do during courses and things like that. So they actually have interactive quizzes and things in that resource to help sort of flesh out this understanding in students. And they made it available. It's open access. So if you keep that link and that you think that's useful for your class, you are free to use it. I would love it if you told me if you used it so I could tell them, because I think they'd be thrilled. Two other groups worked on developing a business plan, trying to flesh out a business that they're interested in. Two other groups were working on a family business, and they were working at sort of troubleshooting some sticking points in their family business. They're kind of heirs to the thrones, I guess you'd say, and they're starting to take over the ropes there. So yeah, I was like, you have to do something. You can choose what it is. And when you give people the freedom to do whatever they want, these are the types of things that kind of come out of that.
It's very exciting to see, isn't it?
Yeah, I thought so. I was like,
it's really cool. Very cool. And when people in the chat are like, oh yeah, really cool. So. and you see, like that first one, the first one was a website. And so I always also give them the freedom, you can, I asked for a bunch of stuff, and you can write it as a report. Sure, you can write it as a report, but if you don't want to do a report, you can submit it as like as a video. You could do it like a vlog. You could do an audio file. You could do graphics. You could do interactions. And that first link that I showed you, it's a website, and that's what they did. Like they had that website, and they built on that. Like every assignment that I kind of made them do throughout the semester, they just built it onto that website. And that was what they like. They didn't hand in a report. They just gave me a link to that website every time I asked for something new. So yeah, and that as a teacher, that makes grading a little bit more interesting than having a pile of papers you have to go through. Just there's a lot more variety as a teacher, and let's say students express themselves a lot more is pretty interesting. Yeah. Should we go to the next slide?
Yeah, you betcha. Let's go to the next slide there. So this is what the students have to say about it. Again, we're less than a year old, so this is all anecdotal. We don't have like hardcore data that we can show you yet, but positive word of mouth. Sort of starting in that top right corner, I liked how it gave me the opportunity to apply what I've learned into a real life version for myself. This was a copy paste. This is what they said. I honestly like the way this class was a fun way of putting different classes together. Yay. Liked everything, like the instructor, the teaching style. What's that? Yep. Variety of activity.
Yeah.
Yep. Freedom to work on a project in the same way you would in the real world. Opportunity for career, future planning, self-reflection, all these cool things. So this is feedback that I got from the class. I'll be honest. And I'm running the same course this summer as well. The first 2 to 3 weeks of the course, you have to because there's very little structure in this course. It's extremely student driven, and there's a lot of people that are not comfortable with that. And you sort of have to spend the first month of the course calming nerves and giving people direction. But once they kind of get into it, they like, oh, they like it. They like it. Once they kind of get their feet under them. So yeah, you want to pop ahead to the next slide?
Sure.
Yeah. So yeah, people give it a that's what I look like. That's me. That's what I look like.
Sorry.
I know. I was like,
I did that slide.
I know that guy. So yeah. So what allows this to happen? So what I'm going to do over the next little bit is I'll talk about like what have we done to make this happen? Like because that's probably the question that we sometimes get is like, how can we do this in our department? So it's like, let me tell you sort of what I feel the secrets to our success are. And then I'll shift gears and I'll talk a little bit about what do I foresee as some of the challenges that we're going to have moving forward. So what I think made this happen was we had a core team of committed people who were jazzed about this. Amanda Bickle, who is not here, was the leader of this process. And she's savvy. She's been around the block a few times. You know, she kind of made sure that the people on the team were committed people on the team. And she kind of scheduled meetings for the people that were not kind of on board. She kind of scheduled the meetings for when they were teaching so they can, I don't know, she made sure that she had a really good team of people who are committed, who are into this, who fed off of each other, that proliferation of novel assessments. This is still happening now. People sort of share their ideas, like ungrading, contract grading. That 4th year course, I do contract grading in that 4th year course. So rather than giving A's, B's, and C's on paper, I'll just like, this is the standard. Does it meet standard? Yes, great. You get a point, move on. It doesn't meet standard. Here, redo it. These are the things you need to change. It's a form of contract grading, ungrading. So we're using all these sort of novel, innovative things and sharing these ideas with each other. We're all devoted to like 0 textbook costs. So all of the courses that we created are 0 textbook costs. They're all open access resources. There are a couple of legacy courses that we have that are still have some textbooks, and we have not quite weaned ourselves off of them. But all the new courses are built 0 textbook costs, and we're dedicated to trying to wean ourselves off of for-profit textbooks in our other courses. So yeah, we have this big drive to develop open access courses. A couple of our teachers are really passionate about it. So yeah, we built that core team. Want to pop ahead? The secret to building this team here. Secret to building that team there. This is what I think. We have a very, very clear sense of what our values are. And that was really the first thing when we were at the very, very earliest stages of this process. We sat down as a group, and I remember having this conversation, and it was like, what are our values? What's important to us? We clearly identified it, and we clearly articulate it, and it is front and center in all that we do. We didn't just do it and sticks it in a shelf. We've clearly articulated it. We announce it. This is what's important to us. This is what we do. Those 4 PLOs, they're sort of catchy. Those, know thyself, blah, blah, blah. They're catchy. They're easy to remember. That's forefront of everything we do, right? So clearly articulating those values communicates what are we about. It draws like-minded people to us. People who aren't interested in that don't come knocking on our door. So clearly articulating the values, I think, is really, really important. This ability to reflect and take risks together. Right now, so I've just taken on the role of chair of the department. So I'm trying to create this culture where we're of risk taking, of innovating, we're trying stuff and celebrating risks, celebrating trying stuff, celebrating failures, learning from it, sort of leveraging our existing points of strength. And yeah, just evaluating the commitment of those values baked into our recruitment. When we bring in new people, we ask them to identify how they manifest our values in their work, so that that's part of our recruitment process. So making sure that I think that building this team, building it around these core sets of values was absolutely key. If you want to slide ahead. Oh yeah, learning, yeah, Moodle. But yeah, if you want to pop ahead to the next.
Sorry, I'm just trying to.
There we go. Yeah, no problem.
Sorry.
Yeah. So one of the things that's ongoing now is we're in the process of developing our quality system to assess quality for this course, right? So we belong to some accreditation bodies, which are basically quality system bodies, and so we need to develop our PLOs, which we've done. We need to sort of map out which courses teach which PLO at what level, and then we need to start to identify where can we collect data to see, is our program actually delivering the learning outcomes that we say it does? And we're in the middle of this process right now of establishing this. As I say, we've established our PLOs, and we're currently developing figuring out where do we want to collect data and developing assessment tools. Now, this kind of comes into, there's some challenges here. There's some challenges here with the way that we've structured our course, that we've been having, we've had some really, really deep conversations about this. But, we have very open prereq structures. So it is entirely possible that there are some third-year courses that students could take in our program without having taken any first or second-year courses in our program. There's a lot of courses in our first, second, and third year where you can take our course without being a business student. And I saw Richard was asking some questions about, like, how do you backfill the skills? And that is a fascinating challenge. And we're seeing the words we're getting, what we're getting from our teachers is that everywhere from first to third year, we are getting around 5 to 10% of our students are from outside. They're from like totally different departments. And teachers love it because the conversations are tremendously rich when you start getting science students and business students and art students together. But you have to really adapt how you teach. You have to, we have to make sure that this is something that this is accessible to everyone. You have to adapt how you can teach. And then in terms of where do we collect data, who do we collect data from, which courses, sort of trying to identify what are the courses that we can use is a bit of a challenge, because we kind of have this mix. And so we have to sort of walk through all these types of issues there. All right, now, Sean, I'm going to talk about some of the challenges that I see there. What would you?
Can I just pause for a sec? We've got Tracy's just asked if we can apparently there are lots of questions that are waiting. So she's just asking if we can wrap up in a couple of minutes. So
I would love to do that. All right, you want to pop to the next slide? The future. What are we doing here? So anticipated challenges. There's always the challenge that new teachers, as we recruit new faculty in, that they'll dilute the culture that we have. UDL, we built this course around UDL, but getting that what is it? How do we actually train people in this is a challenge, right? Finding training and getting teachers to take the training. There's always the risk of complacency and just reverting to the status quo. If you pop to the next slide, I'll tell you what I'm trying to do. So I'm trying to create a culture, right? It's a new program. We've got a brand new team. My goal as this incoming chair is like, okay, I want to create a culture, culture eats policy, culture eats strategy, right? If we create the culture, then these things will happen automatically, right? So I, lead with our values. I'm creating this idea where we sort of show this show and tell. All of our monthly meetings, we have a show and tell where I encourage people to share what's something you tried in your class, how did it work, what are some cool things that are going on, just so we create this culture where we share ideas, we try new things, and we celebrate it. Leaning on those core, we got that core, leaning on them to mentor in new hires and bring them on board, and just creating that expectation that we live our values, that this is us, this is who we are, this is what we do, and that we celebrate it, we honor it. This is what we want out of faculty here. That's what I want to do. Wish me luck. If you pop to the next slide, I think, I don't have my wish me luck. Yeah, professional development. One of the things I want to do with this is
next.
flesh out and formalize our professional development process. Right now, it's kind of our professional development as teachers can kind of just do whatever they want. I'd like to provide some guidelines, some guidance, or some hints as to the types of PD that would be valuable to our department. So hopefully I can make it easy for people to do the things, to learn and develop the skills to enact the values that we have here. That's one of the things that I'm hoping on. And then, wish me luck with that. That's the last slide there. Oh no, quality. Yeah, wish me luck. Wish us luck as we do that. So if there's lots of questions, I think we'll both be happy to just grind through them. Where should we start?
That's great.
Did I stop sharing, or is it helpful to keep the slides up for a bit?
Keep that slide up. That's absolutely
Yeah,
fine.
okay.
So
That was
Tracy,
great. I just want to say thank you very much to both of you. There are a number of questions in the chat, and you can maybe even just flick through yourself if I miss anything. I'll start off. You just ended the conversation around professional development, and I suppose, Brad, coming from your perspective, knowing that, you know, Seanna, you've been involved in various aspects through different education sectors with UDL, so you came into this with that in mind in terms of your role. So I suppose it's probably more directed towards Brad in terms of what was your experience of UDL, what was your starting point, where did you draw from? Like, did you, you know, have your own professional development? Did you do a course? Did you read everything? What did you do as an academic thinking about that?
I love that question. And so this is one of the reasons why I want to flesh out this PD. Like everything I learned about UDL, I learned sitting next to Seanna at all these meeting tables here, right? Sorry, Seanna, you were my PD session. You did that for free. So yeah, I kind of, you know, say I had this expert sitting beside me, and I just, you know, I asked questions and yeah, I've taken some PD sessions, and I shouldn't say it, it's not as more than that. I've taken some PD sessions in the past. That's one of the things that I worry about, though. One of the things that is like, I don't know if our university has a vast repository of expertise in UDL that we can draw on to make like easy UDL types of workshops. So that's one of the things that I'll probably focus on, and I'm going to see if I can sweet talk Seanna into doing some workshops for our group and stuff like that. But yeah, so everything, you know, I've taken a couple of like very basic PD sessions. Everything else, I had the expert sitting beside me, and I was just, we sort of worked together for about a year, and that's where I picked up a lot of this stuff. And then we have a teaching and learning department as well that has a lot of these instructional skills. So I have an idea, I always run it by them. They tell me, and yeah, so a lot of it for me has been informal, just talking to the experts. That's really what it's been. It's been talking to the experts. I talk to the experts in our teaching and learning commons, talking to Seanna. I
guess that's the great thing about professional development, isn't it? It can be structured, unstructured, formal, informal, and that's the really nice thing about it. There was a question there, and Seanna, I think you were answering things as you went through. Jesse asked, has there been pushback from students regarding the level of self-determination? You kind of touched on that in the beginning when you were talking about identity and embedding identity. So you said initially there was that kind of pushback, but how do you get over that? And what do you put in process to minimize that, especially being offered so much choice, I suppose, as well?
Was that for you, Seanna?
It can be for both of you.
Yeah. Well, I found there that fourth year course totally a little bit of a lot of concern, a lot of anxiety, and like a lot of it for a lot of students, I find it's like they want to know how to do well, right? Just how do I succeed in this course? And they're kind of used to one format through their life. Boom, we sort of switched the format, causes a lot of anxiety. I found, you know, sort of a lot of the way to deal with that is, is to give them the path forward. So a lot of times what I'll do is you get to do, you know, I want you to pursue something that is of interest to you. If you don't have any ideas, here's 2 or 3 ideas, right? So like I'll have 2 or 3 project ideas of my own, and then the fourth one is whatever you want kind of thing, right? So a lot of it is kind of giving a little bit of structure and helping students see that path forward to getting their success. There are some students who are just like, hey, I just want to memorize the textbook, and there isn't a textbook to memorize. That's not how it works. And yeah, sometimes it's got to be a bit of, there are some students that, you know, there are some students that just kind of want to do that. You know, they just want to memorize the textbook and get out of here. and they do need to make a bit of a mental shift to want it. I find, I find for the most part though, because we're letting them explore areas of interest to them, that that's not a problem. The problem is most people is that anxiety.
Yeah. And
I'm
I think
just,
at the beginning, sorry, Seanna, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm just I'm seeing too, just along these lines, Camilla in the chat is asking to describe the different ways students were involved in the redesign of the program. And I think this connects to what you've just talked about, Brad. So there were several students, I think there were 3 students who were responsible for collecting a lot of data on kind of what are students saying? What are the attitudes? What are the approaches that are sort of surrounding the ENTR program? And there was a big report that was generated that kind of synthesized and reflected all of those voices. So that's sort of where the student engagement came from. And I think the goal is as the program moves along and and develops, there will be that sort of idea that, you're coming in, because that was in the report too, that students kind of, that was one of the pieces that they were concerned about. But as the program develops, and gains that reputation for, developing an identity, that you will be sort of working in the gray areas, you will be developing, your own sort of ideas and concepts and pathways. There will be, the idea is that there will be a kind of culture that grows up around that. And I think, Camilla, as you're asking, that's a huge concern. What's the feedback loop going to be? And right now, as Brad was saying, it is sort of informal. What did you think of this? What's your feedback on this course? But also having the openness to say, what else could we do? How else could this look? So I hope that answers the question. And again, it's really in the first year. So that is TBD. And if you have any thoughts or any suggestions, by all means, please get in touch with us and let us know.
And it's a great practical example as well, because that's a huge advocate of the Sustainable Development Goals, which across Ireland and the UK and many other countries are huge. It's a thing that is being implemented across disciplines and different schools and faculties working together and collaborating. And of course, goal 4 is quality education, so equity for all. So if we're working in further or higher education, we can't really be thinking about inclusion unless we're thinking about the Sustainable Development Goals. And I think it's really important because for many institutions, that's the highest level at the moment, and then everything else fits underneath that. And I know that program is very much, it's the same in our own institution in Queen's at the moment, that our Queen's Management School are huge promoters of the Sustainable Development Goals. So I'm definitely going to be sharing this link and recording with them, because I know they'll be very interested. And what's really nice about what you were sharing today was a very practical example of committed people coming together from all different disciplines and backgrounds, from industry, the university, your academics, employers, students, and that's really, that co-design, it's really core. But looking at that lens through you, I really enjoyed listening to both of you, and that practical example of not alone, like we've done this now, actually you're already thinking forward, you're already thinking about what will change, what else can we do, how deep can we go? And that's the really nice thing about the framework, I think, that it provides the guidelines, and that's what they are. But also, you can dip deeper into anything at any one time, and you've already gone really wide, kind of, you've cast a wide net. And now I suppose it's that reflection piece, isn't it, of really thinking like, where are still the complications and the challenges in each module in the program overall, and how can we work from that? So I would say, because I'm just conscious of time and I just want to respect everyone's time, and I do want to say thank you from us here in Include to everybody who was able to attend, and the recording will be available for anyone who wasn't able to attend today. And I do believe everybody will agree and put a virtual clap in hand or turn your camera on and thank both Seanna and Brad for sharing their expertise, their knowledge, We're absolutely delighted to have you as part of our Include community, and please do reach out again. I'm sure Marissa or Seanna will put back in the Include website link. So please do reach out to us. There's lots of other blog posts there. There's lots of other content there. So please do check that out. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having us.